The stars had always been quiet. For millions of years, the Dominion had moved through the galaxy like a shadow, taking what they wanted and destroying what they did not need. They had conquered 17 star systems. They had defeated 12 different species. Not one of those species had ever won a single battle against them. Commander stood on the bridge of his warship and looked at the small blue planet on the main screen. His second officer, a younger named, stood beside him with a data pad in his clawed hands. "What do we know about this world?" asked. Looked at his data. "They call it Earth, population of 8 billion. They have basic space travel limited to their own star system. Their weapons are primitive, chemical propulsion, nuclear devices, nothing that can threaten our shields." Made a low sound in his throat. It was the way of showing boredom. Another easy conquest. Send the standard message. They have 72 hours to surrender. The message was sent. It traveled at the speed of light and reached Earth in seconds. Every television, every radio, every phone on the planet received the same words translated into every human language. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Dominion. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments, your military forces, and your resources. If you do not surrender, we will destroy your cities one by one until you submit. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." In homes and offices and streets all over the world, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. Some screamed. Some cried. Some prayed to gods they had not spoken to in years. But in a gray building in Washington, D.C., a group of old soldiers sat in a room and listened to the message with very different expressions on their faces. Colonel Jack was 63 years old. His hair was gray and his knees hurt when it rained. He had fought in 3 ground wars during his 40 years of service. He had buried friends in deserts and jungles and mountains. He had killed men and watched men die and carried the weight of command through the darkest nights of his life. He was supposed to be retired. He had a small house in Virginia and a dog named Murphy and a garden where he grew tomatoes. But when the call came, he did not hesitate. He put on his uniform and drove to the Pentagon. Now he sat at a long table with 2 other veterans. Admiral Lisa was 61. She had commanded submarines and aircraft carriers and had spent more of her life at sea than on land. General Pike was 59 and had led troops in combat on 4 continents. The President of the United States sat at the head of the table. He was a young man, only 45, and he had never served in the military. He looked at the 3 old warriors with something like hope in his eyes. "They want us to surrender," the President said. "Our scientists tell me their technology is hundreds of years ahead of ours, maybe thousands. Our weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Our ships cannot match their speed. What options do we have?" Jack leaned forward in his chair. His back ached, but he ignored it. "With respect, sir, I do not think they understand what they are asking." "Explain." Jack looked at Lisa and they nodded at him to continue. "Sir, these aliens have been conquering other species for a long time. We have studied the patterns of their previous invasions from the data we have gathered. Every species they conquered did the same thing. They looked at the technology. They looked at their own technology. They did the math. And they surrendered." The President frowned. "That seems like the logical choice." "It is the logical choice," Jack agreed. "If you are a species that has never known real war, if you are a species that measures victory only by the numbers." Lisa spoke up. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of a woman who had given orders in hurricanes and battles. "Mr. President, humanity is different. We have been fighting each other since we first learned to pick up rocks. Every generation has produced warriors. Every century has produced new weapons and new tactics. We have never known peace. Not really. Not for long." Added his voice. "The look at our technology and see weakness. But technology is not what wins wars. Will wins wars. Training wins wars. Sacrifice wins wars. And sir, We have thousands of years of that." The president was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the three veterans, these old soldiers who should have been home with and he saw something in their eyes that he had never seen before. It was not fear. It was not hope. It was certainty. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Jack stood up. His knees protested, but he ignored them. "We call back every veteran who can still hold a weapon, every retired soldier, sailor, marine, and pilot, every man and woman who has ever seen combat and survived. We do not have their technology, but we have something they have never faced." "What is that?" "Experience," Jack said. 10,000 years of it. They have conquered species that did not know how to fight. They have never faced a species that has been at war with itself since the beginning of time. They think they know what battle looks like. They are wrong." The president looked at his advisors. They were all younger men and women, educated and smart, but none of them had ever heard a bullet fly past their head. None of them had ever held a dying friend in their arms. "Do it," the president said. "Call them back, all of them." Within hours, the message went out. It was not a formal order. It was a request. A simple message sent to every veteran in every country on Earth. "Your planet needs you one last time." In a small house in Texas, 70-year-old Master Sergeant Collins read the message on his phone. He looked at his wife of 45 years. She was already packing his bag. "I knew this day would come," she said. "Go save the world, you old fool." Kissed her and walked out the door. In California, Captain Amy read the same message. She had lost her left arm in a helicopter crash 15 years ago. The doctors had given her a mechanical replacement that worked almost as well as the original. She had not flown a combat mission since the accident. She picked up her phone and called Edwards Air Force Base. "This is Captain Amy, retired. I am coming in. Find me something to fly." In Florida, Chief Petty Officer Vega put down his fishing rod and looked at the message. He was 68 years old and had spent 30 years in submarines. He knew those metal tubes better than he knew his own children. "Well," he said to no one in particular, "looks like retirement is over." All over the world, old soldiers heard the call. They came from farms and cities, from small towns and big apartments. They came with bad backs and old scars and memories that still woke them up at night. They came because their planet needed them. And somewhere in orbit, Commander watched the human world and waited for their surrender. He would wait a long time. The first veterans arrived at Fort before the sun came up. They came in old trucks and borrowed cars, and some even walked from the bus station. The guards at the gate had never seen anything like it. There were men and women in their 60s and 70s. Some walked with canes. Some had hearing aids. Some had scars that ran across their faces like maps of old battles. They did not look like soldiers. They looked like grandparents. But when they showed their old military identification cards, the guards let them through without a word. Master Sergeant Collins was one of the first to arrive. He had 2 artificial knees and a metal plate in his skull from a war that most young people had forgotten. He walked slowly, but he walked with purpose. A young private met him at the entrance to the main building. The private was maybe 20 years old, fit and strong and full of energy. He looked at with confusion. "Sir, are you sure you are in the right place?" the private asked. Smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Son, I was killing enemies before your father was born. Show me where to sign in." The private led him inside. The base was chaos. Thousands of veterans were arriving every hour. Some came from other states. Some came from other countries. American soldiers who had retired to Mexico or Canada came back. British veterans and French veterans and German veterans joined them. This was not just America's fight. This was humanity's fight. Colonel Jack arrived at noon. He found Admiral Lisa and General Pike already there, trying to bring order to the chaos. They had set up a command center in one of the large hangars. How many do we have? Jack asked. Lisa checked her tablet. As of right now, about 40,000 veterans have reported in across the country. More are coming every minute. Other nations are doing the same thing. The British have recalled every living veteran. So have the French, the Germans, the Russians, the Chinese. Everyone shook his head in wonder. I never thought I would see this. Old enemies standing together. We have a new enemy now, Jack said. That changes things. The young soldiers on the base did not know what to make of the veterans. They had been trained in modern warfare. They knew how to use the latest weapons and technology. They had studied tactics in classrooms and practiced them in simulations. But the veterans had something the young soldiers did not have. They had real experience. They had fought in real battles where real people died. They knew what fear felt like, and they knew how to keep moving even when they were afraid. Jack gathered the first group of young Marines in a large room. About 200 of them sat in chairs and looked at him with curious eyes. Behind Jack stood a line of veterans. Collins was there, along with a dozen others. They were old and tired, but they stood straight. You have been trained well, Jack said to the young Marines. Your instructors taught you everything they knew, but your instructors learned from books and simulations. We learned from blood. He pointed to, this man fought in 3 wars. He has been shot twice and stabbed once. He has killed more enemies than he can count, and he has carried more dead friends than he wants to remember. He knows things that no book can teach. Stepped forward. His voice was rough from years of shouting orders. They have never lost a war. They think this makes them strong, but it actually makes them weak. They have never had to adapt. They have never had to learn from failure. We have lost wars. We have lost battles. And every single time we came back smarter and stronger. A young Marine raised his hand. Sir, their technology is way ahead of ours. How can experience beat technology? Smiled again. Son, let me tell you a story. In one of my wars, we faced an enemy with better weapons and better armor. On paper, we should have lost every fight, but we learned their patterns. We studied their habits. We found their weaknesses, and we used the ground itself against them. We used the weather. We used the night. We used tricks that our grandfathers taught us. He paused and looked at the young faces before him. Technology is a tool, nothing more. The warrior who uses the tool is what matters, and humans have been sharpening ourselves as weapons for 10,000 years. The training began immediately. The veterans worked with the young soldiers day and night. They taught them things that were not in any manual. Captain Amy stood on a runway with a group of young pilots. She had her mechanical arm and a look in her eyes that made the young pilots nervous. You fly by computer, she said. The computer tells you what to do and you do it. That works fine against human enemies, but these aliens have never seen a human fly. They do not know what we are capable of. She pointed to the sky. I am going to teach you to fly like your life depends on it, because it does. I am going to teach you tricks that computers cannot predict, moves that seem impossible, things that only work because human beings are crazy enough to try them. A young pilot named Ben Hardy raised his hand. Ma'am, some of those old moves are considered too dangerous now. They removed them from the training program. Amy looked at him with cold eyes. They removed them because they were too dangerous for practice. This is not practice anymore. This is survival. If you are not willing to risk your life, you are not going to survive anyway. In the ocean, Chief Petty Officer Vega stood on the deck of a nuclear submarine. Around him were young sailors who had never seen real combat. They come from space, said. They think in 3 dimensions, but they forget about one thing, depth. They scan the surface. They watch the sky, but they do not look down into the dark water. He pointed at the ocean. We have been fighting in these waters for over 100 years. We know every current. We know every hiding place. We know how to disappear and reappear when the enemy least expects it. That is our advantage. A young sailor asked, Can our torpedoes even hurt their ships? Nodded slowly. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, lasers, plasma, things they have seen before, but they have never faced a species that still uses explosives. Simple chemical explosives packed into a metal tube and launched through the water. It is so primitive that they might not even recognize it as a threat until it is too late. Across the world, similar scenes played out. Old veterans taught young soldiers the lessons of 1,000 wars. They taught ambush tactics from ancient battles. They taught survival skills from frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They taught the art of deception and the science of fear. They had 72 hours to wait. They spent that time scanning Earth's military forces and laughing at what they found. Primitive aircraft, simple ships, soldiers with projectile weapons. What they did not scan was the knowledge inside those soldiers. They could not measure the experience. They could not quantify the wisdom. They did not understand that they were not facing Earth's current army. They were facing every army humanity had ever produced. On the final night before the deadline, Jack stood alone on the roof of the command building. He looked up at the stars and saw the distant lights of the fleet. Lisa joined him. They stood in silence for a long moment. "Do you think we can win?" Lisa asked. Jack was quiet for a while. "I think we can make them bleed. I think we can make this the hardest fight they have ever faced. And I think that if we hurt them badly enough, they might decide we are not worth the trouble." Lisa nodded. "That is not exactly a victory." "No," Jack agreed. "But it is survival. And for humans, survival has always been enough. We survive, we rebuild, we come back stronger. That is what we do. That is what we have always done." The sun rose on the day of the invasion. Somewhere in orbit, Commander gave the order to begin the attack. And on Earth, 1,000,000 veterans put on their old uniforms and prepared to fight one more time. The invasion began on a Tuesday morning. Fell from the sky like metal rain. They came down on every continent in every major city, following a pattern that had worked on 12 other worlds. Land in the population centers. Show overwhelming force. Watch the natives surrender. But something was wrong from the very first moment. In London, a battalion landed in Park. 300 warriors in powered armor stepped out of their ships, weapons ready, waiting for the screaming crowds to run. The park was empty. The battalion commander, a veteran named, looked around with confusion. His scanners showed that millions of humans lived in this city. Where were they? "Spread out," he ordered. "Search the buildings, find the population." His warriors moved into the streets. The city was silent. Cars sat empty on the roads. Shops had their doors open, but no one was inside. It was like the entire population had simply vanished. Then the first shot rang out. A warrior fell, a hole punched clean through his helmet. The shot had come from a window 300 meters away. Before the others could react, more shots came from other windows, from rooftops, from doorways. Screamed into his communicator, "We are under attack. The natives are hiding in the buildings." It was an ambush. The humans had evacuated the civilians and replaced them with soldiers. Old soldiers. Veterans who knew how to hide and wait and strike at the perfect moment. Sergeant Major lay on a rooftop with a rifle that was older than some of the aliens he was shooting. He was 74 years old and his hands were steady as stone. Beside him, a young soldier named Morgan spotted targets through binoculars. "3 more on the corner," said, "near the fountain." Adjusted his aim and fired 3 times. 3 aliens fell. "They are not used to this," said calmly. "Look at them, they bunch up, they move in straight lines, they have never been hunted before." Watched as the warriors scrambled for cover. They were strong and fast and their armor was impressive, but they moved like soldiers who had never faced a real enemy. They did not check corners. They did not watch rooftops. They did not expect danger from every shadow. "They are going to learn fast," said. Nodded. Then we have to kill as many as we can before they do. In Chicago, the story was the same. A force landed in the city center and found themselves surrounded. Buildings that looked empty were full of soldiers. Streets that seemed safe were kill zones. Colonel Jack commanded the defense from an underground bunker. He watched the battle through dozens of cameras and listened to reports from his officers. "They are falling back in Sector 7, someone reported. "We have taken down at least 50 of them." "Do not let them retreat," Jack ordered. "Follow them, keep the pressure on. They are not used to being chased." In the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Lisa sat in the control room of a submarine. The vessel was old, but it was quiet, quieter than anything they had ever detected. She watched her screens and waited. A ship had landed on the water near Hawaii. It was a transport, carrying supplies for the ground forces. The aliens had not considered that the ocean might be dangerous. "Target acquired," her weapons officer said. "Range 2,000 meters." Lisa smiled. "Fire." The torpedo left the submarine in silence. It traveled through the dark water like a shark hunting prey. The ship had shields, powerful shields that could stop plasma and lasers. But the torpedo was not plasma or laser. It was just a tube full of explosives, simple and primitive and completely unexpected. The explosion tore the bottom out of the ship. Water rushed in. The vessel sank in minutes. On the command ship in orbit, Commander received the reports with growing anger. "What do you mean they are fighting back?" he demanded. "The scans showed their military was primitive." His officers had no explanation. Every invasion had followed the same pattern. Land forces show strength, accept surrender. But the humans were not surrendering. They were fighting in ways they had never seen. "They hide in buildings and shoot from windows," one officer reported. "They use explosives buried underground. They attack from places we cannot scan. Our warriors are dying by the hundreds." Slammed his fist on the console. "Then send more warriors. We have millions. They cannot possibly win." But as the days passed, the losses mounted. They were strong, but they were learning a terrible lesson. Strength was not enough when your enemy knew how to use weakness as a weapon. In the mountains of Afghanistan, a place that had taught many armies the cost of arrogance, old warriors who had spent their lives fighting in those rocks now turned their skills against a new enemy. Patrols entered the valleys and never came out. Their bodies were found later, killed by traps and ambushes that had been perfected over centuries. In the jungles of Vietnam, another generation of veterans remembered the lessons of their fathers. The jungle was alive with danger. Every tree could hide a sniper. Every path could hide a trap. They learned to fear the green darkness. In the deserts of Iraq, soldiers who had fought in those sands 20 and 30 and 40 years ago returned to fight again. They knew the heat and the dust and the way the land could kill you if you did not respect it. And everywhere, the young soldiers learned from the old. Morgan learned to shoot from. Ben Hardy learned to fly impossible maneuvers from Amy. Young submarine crews learned the secrets of silent warfare from Vega. They adapted slowly. They began to check corners and watch rooftops. They began to expect ambushes. But every time they learned one lesson, the humans taught them another. "They are learning our tactics," reported to Colonel after a week of fighting. Jack nodded. "Then we change tactics. That is what we do. We never fight the same way twice." He looked at the maps showing the battle across the planet. They had taken some ground, but they had paid dearly for every meter. Cities were in ruins, but they were contested ruins. The aliens controlled nothing securely. "They expected us to break," Jack said. "Every other species they conquered broke when they saw the coming. But we have been breaking and rebuilding for 10,000 years. We know how to take a punch. We know how to get back up." In London, had lost half his battalion. He sent a message to the command ship that would change the course of the war. "The humans are not like the others," he reported. "They do not fight to win. They fight to survive, and they will die to ensure others live. They have old warriors leading young ones, teaching them tricks we have never seen. This is not a conquest. This is a war, a real war. Commander read the message and felt something he had never felt before in his long military career. He felt doubt. Somewhere on Earth, in a ruined building in Chicago, 70-year-old Collins cleaned his rifle and smiled. His body ached. He had not slept in 3 days. A piece of shrapnel had cut his cheek and the blood had dried on his face. But he was still fighting, and as long as he was fighting, so was humanity. They thought they knew what war looked like, he muttered to himself. They had no idea. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. They had expected victory in days. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a war that seemed to have no end. High Commander arrived on Earth to see the situation for himself. He was the supreme military leader of the Dominion, a warrior who had personally conquered 4 worlds. He had never known defeat. He stood in the ruins of what had once been a human city called Detroit. Around him, warriors patrolled the empty streets with nervous eyes. They watched every window. They checked every corner. They had learned to fear the shadows. "Explain this to me," said to the local commander. "We have superior weapons, superior armor, superior numbers. How are we losing?" The local commander, a battered officer named, shook his head slowly. "We are not losing, High Commander. We are winning. We hold ground. We kill their soldiers, but they do not stop. They never stop." "Every species stops when they see they cannot win," said. "Not this one," pointed to the buildings around them. 3 days ago, we cleared this area. We killed every human we found. We thought it was secure. Yesterday, they came back. They crawled through tunnels we did not know existed. They attacked at night when our sensors worked poorly. They killed 30 of my warriors and vanished before we could respond." Was quiet for a long moment. "Show me a prisoner." They brought a human to him. It was an old woman, maybe 60 years old, with gray hair and a face covered in dirt and blood. She had been captured during a raid on a supply line. She had killed 2 warriors with a knife before they subdued her. Looked at her with curiosity. "You are old. You should be resting in your final years. Why do you fight?" The woman smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Because my father fought, and his father before him, and his father before that. Fighting is what we do. It is what we have always done." "You cannot win," said. "You must know this." "Winning is not the point," the woman replied. "Survival is the point. Making you pay for every inch of ground is the point. Every one of you we kill is one fewer to threaten our children. Every day we hold on is one more day for our people to escape, to hide, to prepare for the next fight." Stared at her for a long time. "What is your name?" "Susan Miller, Master Sergeant, United States Army, retired. I served for 35 years. I fought in wars you never heard of against enemies who are now our friends. That is another thing you do not understand about humans. Today's enemy is tomorrow's ally. We forgive, we adapt, we survive." He ordered her returned to the prisoner area. Then he called a meeting of all his senior commanders. The meeting took place on his flagship in orbit. Dozens of officers gathered in the war room, their faces grim. The holographic displays showed the situation on Earth. Red zones marked areas of human resistance. After 6 months, most of the planet was still red. "This invasion is costing us more than the last 12 conquests combined," said. "Our warriors are dying in numbers we have never seen. Our supplies are running low, and the humans show no sign of surrender." A young officer spoke up. "High Commander, perhaps we should simply destroy their cities from orbit, eliminate the population and take the planet." Shook his head. "We need their resources. Their world is rich in materials we require. If we burn it, we gain nothing." "Then what do we do?" An older officer, one of the few who had survived ground combat against the humans, stepped forward. His name was Axe, and he had a new scar across his face where a human blade had nearly killed him. "I have studied them," Axe said. "I have fought them, I have watched them die, and I have learned something important." "Speak," ordered. "They have a concept we do not understand. They call it sacrifice. It means giving your life so that others may live. Our warriors fight for glory, for honor, for the dominion. Humans fight for each other. The old ones fight to protect the young. The strong fight to protect the weak. They do not care about glory, they care about survival." He paused and looked at the red map of Earth. Every human soldier knows they might die. They accept it. They embrace it. Because they know that their death will give others a chance to live. We cannot break that. We cannot defeat that kind of will. Was silent for a long time. "Are you suggesting we cannot win?" "I am suggesting that even if we win, we will lose. We will take this planet, but we will lose half our army doing it. We will control the surface, but they will fight us from underground, from the mountains, from the oceans. They will never stop. Their children will grow up learning to hate us and to fight us. There will continue the war. We will win the battle and lose the war." On Earth, Colonel Jack did not know about this meeting. He was too busy fighting. The defense had been reorganized dozens of times. Every time they adapted, the humans changed their tactics. It was exhausting, it was brutal, and it was working. In the Rocky Mountains, Jack led a guerrilla campaign that had become legendary. His forces were small, but they moved constantly. They struck at supply lines and vanished into the wilderness. They used knowledge of the land that had been passed down for generations. Admiral Lisa had sunk 17 ships with her submarine fleet. The aliens had learned to fear the water. They stayed away from the oceans when they could. General Pike coordinated global resistance from bunkers that moved every few days. He used old methods of communication that they could not intercept. Messages passed by hand. Information shared through networks of civilians who had become soldiers. The young soldiers had become veterans themselves. Morgan had been promoted 3 times. She led her own unit now, a mix of old warriors and young fighters who had learned to work together. Ben Hardy had become the most successful pilot in the war. He flew missions that seemed impossible, using techniques that Amy had taught him. He had shot down 18 aircraft. The war had changed everyone. The old had found purpose again. The young had found wisdom. And humanity had found something it had not felt in generations: unity. In a quiet moment between battles, Colin sat with a young soldier named Chris. Chris was 22 years old and had been fighting since the first day of the invasion. "Do you think we can win?" Chris asked. Lit a cigarette, something he had quit doing 20 years ago. "Son, winning means different things. If you mean will we drive them off our planet completely, maybe, maybe not. If you mean will we survive as a species, absolutely." "How can you be so sure?" Smiled his rough smile. "Because we always have. Humans have faced extinction before, ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions. Every time someone survived, someone rebuilt, someone kept fighting. That is who we are, that is what we do." He looked at the young soldier. "You will tell your children about this war, and they will tell their children. And 1,000 years from now, humans will still be here, still fighting, still surviving. That is our victory, not today, not tomorrow, but forever." Chris nodded slowly. He did not fully understand, but he believed the old soldier. He had to believe. It was the only thing that kept him going. High in orbit, made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel to the human leaders," he ordered. "Tell them we wish to discuss terms." The war was not over, but for the first time they were willing to talk. 1 year after the invasion began, the war ended. Not with a final battle, not with a dramatic victory. It ended with a conversation on a ruined street in what had once been Geneva, Switzerland. High Commander stood on one side. He was tall and powerful, his armor from battles he had never expected to fight. Behind him stood a small guard of warriors, their weapons lowered but ready. On the other side stood 3 old humans, Colonel Jack, Admiral Lisa, General Pike. They wore torn uniforms and carried old weapons and looked nothing like the conquerors they were used to facing. Between them lay the ruins of a city that had seen too much death. "You wish to discuss terms," Jack said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had nothing left to fear. Studied the 3 humans for a long moment. They were old. They were tired. And yet they stood straight, their eyes clear and steady. They had spent a year fighting an enemy with superior technology and superior numbers, and they had not broken. "You have cost us more than you can imagine," said. 70,000 warriors dead, hundreds of ships destroyed, resources that could have been used for other conquests wasted on this one planet. Lisa shrugged. "You should not have come." "Perhaps," made the low sound that was the expression of respect. "We have never faced an enemy like you. Every other species we conquered had the sense to surrender when they saw our strength. You did not." "Surrendering is not in our nature," said. "Neither is losing, not completely, not forever." "I am beginning to understand that," looked at the ruins around them. "My advisors tell me that even if we conquer this planet, you will never stop fighting. Your children will fight. Their children will fight. We will spend centuries trying to hold what we have taken, and we will lose more warriors every year." Jack nodded slowly. "That is correct. You can kill us. You can destroy our cities, but you cannot break our will. We have been fighting since the beginning of our history. It is part of who we are. You cannot remove it without removing us entirely. And if we do that, we gain nothing. Your planet becomes worthless. Now you understand." There was a long silence. The wind blew through the ruined buildings, carrying dust and ash. Spoke again. "I came here prepared to offer you terms of surrender, partial occupation, reduced tribute, mercy for your civilians, but I see now that you would not accept such terms." "No," Lisa said, "we would not." "Then I offer you something else," straightened his posture. In the culture, this was a gesture of formal acknowledgement. "The Dominion recognizes Earth as unconquerable. We will withdraw our forces from your solar system. We will not return. Your world and your species will be marked in our records as off-limits for all future conquests." The 3 old veterans looked at each other. After a year of blood and death and sacrifice, they had won, not through superior weapons, not through greater numbers, through sheer stubborn refusal to die quietly. "Why?" Jack asked. "You could keep fighting, you could eventually wear us down." Made that sound of respect again. "Because you have taught us something valuable. The universe is not as we believed. Not every species can be conquered. Some will fight forever, regardless of the cost. We have learned this lesson, and we have learned it from you." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost like admiration in his voice. "You call yourselves humans. In our language, we have a word for species like you. It translates roughly as the ones who do not stop. From this day forward, that is what we will call you, the ones who do not stop." The withdrawal began that afternoon. Ships lifted from the surface and returned to orbit. Ground forces marched back to their landing zones and departed. It was slow and orderly and complete. In cities across the world, people emerged from hiding to watch their conquerors leave. There was no celebration yet. The losses were too fresh. The grief was too deep. But there was something else. Pride, hope, the knowledge that they had faced the impossible and survived. Colonel Jack stood on the roof of a building in Washington, D.C., and watched the last ships disappear into the sky. Beside him stood Collins, Morgan, and dozens of other soldiers who had fought together. "Is it really over?" asked. She was 29 now, older than she had been at the start by far more than 1 year. Jack shook his head. "The fighting is over, but the work is just beginning. We have to rebuild, we have to heal, we have to remember what we learned and make sure we never forget it." Lit a cigarette. The old ways worked. experience and wisdom and sacrifice. Technology is good, but it is not enough. People are what matter. Warriors who know how to fight and why to fight. We should make sure the next generation learns that, said. We should pass down what we learned, just like you passed it down to us. Jack looked at the young woman who had become a leader. That is exactly what we will do. Every veteran will teach. Every survivor will share their story. We will build a world that never forgets what we went through. A world that is always ready for the next threat. In the weeks that followed, the rebuilding began. It was hard and slow and painful. Cities had been destroyed. Millions had died. The scars would take generations to heal. But humanity endured, as it always had, as it always would. The veterans became teachers. Colin spent his final years training young soldiers, sharing the lessons he had learned across 5 decades of warfare. Amy opened a flight school where she taught pilots to push beyond their limits. Vega wrote a book about submarine warfare that became required reading for every Navy on Earth. Jack retired for the final time at 83 years old. He went back to his house in Virginia, to his garden and his memories, but people still came to see him. Young soldiers who wanted to learn, historians who wanted to record, leaders who wanted guidance. One afternoon, a young Marine came to visit. Her name was Sarah Torres, and she was 19 years old, just starting her military career. "Sir," she said, sitting on his porch and looking at the old man who had helped save the world, "why did we win? We had worse weapons, fewer soldiers. How did we beat them?" Jack was quiet for a long time. He looked at the sky, remembering all the battles and all the friends he had lost, and all the impossible moments when victory seemed unreachable. "We did not beat them with weapons," he said finally. "We beat them with time, with history. Every veteran who fought in that war carried the lessons of every war that came before. We have been learning how to fight for 10,000 years. They had never faced that. They conquered species that had known peace. We have never known peace. Not really." He smiled at the young woman. "You are a soldier now. That means you carry all of that history inside you, the wisdom of every warrior who came before. When you face an enemy, you are not alone. You have millions of ghosts fighting beside you. That is our true strength. That is what they could not understand." Sarah nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but she would. In time, she would face her own battles and learn her own lessons, and one day she would pass them on to the next generation. That is what humans did. That is what humans would always do. Years later, travelers from Earth met other species in the galaxy. They heard stories about the Dominion and the warning that was passed from world to world. "Do not challenge the humans," the story went. "They have been preparing for you since before you knew they existed. They do not fight like other species. They fight to survive. They fight forever. They are the ones who do not stop." And somewhere in the great records of the Dominion, there was an entry for the small blue planet called Earth. It was marked with a single symbol that meant danger, not because humans had superior weapons, not because humans had greater numbers, but because humans had something they had never encountered. They had 10,000 years of battle-hardened veterans, and they had passed that wisdom from generation to generation, an unbroken chain of warriors stretching back to the beginning of their history. The thought they knew what a fight looked like. They were wrong.